Hello friends, I am Shivaji Bhaskar, Faculty of Russian at the School of Foreign Languages, IGNOU. I welcome you all to this course, Basics of Russian Communication Skills Part 1. As you are already aware that in our previous modules, we have discussed about the Russian alphabet, vowel and consonants and gender in Russian language with a few examples. You have also learned about the personal pronouns and possessive pronouns in Russian. We have also discussed about the fundamentals of agreement between noun and adjective endings in Russian. Now, since you have been introduced to the verb conjugations and interrogative words and expressions in Russian, like days of week, months of year, case system in Russian, etc., in a very detailed manner. Now, we will be discussing about many new concepts like the case system one by one. So, since you have already learned about the nominative case and prepositional case of Russian in an accurate manner with a few examples, now in this module we will be learning about the usage of nouns which we use to answer questions like a kom and a чем. A kom means about whom and a чем means about what. So, these are two basic questions which we used in the prepositional case. Now further you will be introduced to few more new Russian words and expressions along with few new verbs as well. So I hope all of you are ready to explore the questions a kom and a чем in the prepositional case. Alright, now let's go ahead and pay attention to this particular exercise where we will be using these two questions a kom and a чем. To simplify this, let me tell you that when in Russian we talk about animate or inanimate, we use two different kind of connotations. Animate we use кто, which means who, and что means what. For example, we have used the questions, very simple questions like who is this and what is this. So we have used кто это and что это. When we are saying кто это, we can say это мой брат, это мой друг, это Антон, это Анна, etc. Like this is my friend, this is my brother, this is Anton and this is Anna. Whereas when we ask question что это, which means what is this, then we answer это стол, это стул, это дверь, это комната. So these kind of questions we see when we say что это, what is this. So likewise, like in this module we are going to talk about a kom, about whom, and a чем, about what. So the questions a kom, about whom, and a чем, about what relate to animate and inanimate objects respectively. So one fundamental is clear, a kom is for animate and a чем is for inanimate. So please pay attention to the exercise while we discuss it with you further. So I'll start with a kom on рассказывает. A kom on рассказывает. Here we can also pay attention to the intonation as the sound at the end, the pitch of the sound rises at the end. So we are asking a question, so it is an interrogative sentence. But the question is a kom, about whom, on рассказывает, he is telling. Он рассказывает о друге. Он рассказывает о друге. He is talking about, he is telling about a friend. So when we use a, it means about. He is telling about friend. Drug changes into druge. So this is the construction of the Russian grammar in this particular case, which is known as prepositional case. We have also learned in the previous modules about the usage of the question где, which means where. There we have used the predlog or the preposition like v and n. V means in, n means at. However, in this case, when we have questions like acom and achum, whenever we put a, so if we have a word of masculine gender, at the end we add ye. So in this case we have druge, a druge. Now please pay attention to the next sentence. Achom ani gavarayat. About what they are talking, saying. Ani gavarayat a novam ruskam filme. They are talking about new Russian film. So here we have the adjectives novam ruskam filme. So the film, the noun, changes into filme. Here again we have changed it into filme. We have added ye. So you have also need to keep this in mind while converting the sentence while using o, which means about. However, in both cases, whenever it is acom or achom, if the noun belongs to masculine gender, it has the ending ye. We add ye. Alright? Okay, now let's go ahead and pay attention to this dialogue so that you can understand how do we use different settings, different fundamentals, different grammar patterns, especially when we use a, means about in Russian. So I am going to start with the first line. Anton is asking, Natasha, сегодня Ramesh спрашивал о тебе и твоей сестре. So Anton is saying to Natasha, Natasha, сегодня Ramesh спрашивал о тебе и о твоей сестре. Natasha, today Ramesh asked about you and your sister. So here please pay attention to the construction о тебе. So here in place of ты, when we use a, it changes into achibye. And when we have in nominative case tvaya sestra, it changes into, when we use a tvaye sestre, about your sister. So these are the basic endings in this particular case when we use o. Then Natasha, а что он спрашивал? Natasha is saying and asking, а что он means Ramesh. А что он спрашивал? And what did he ask? Anton. Он спрашивал, где живет твоя сестра. Anton is saying, он спрашивал, means Ramesh asked, where does your sister live? So где живет, it is где means where, живет is the conjugated form of жить for он, она, где живет твоя сестра. So where does your sister live? Natasha, а что он спрашивал обо мне? So here please pay attention to the special construction. When we use these personal pronouns, я is обо мне, ты is о тебе. Okay? So Natasha is saying, а что он спрашивал обо мне? What did Ramesh ask about me? Anton, он спрашивал, где ты работаешь? So Anton is saying, он спрашивал, Ramesh asked, where do you work? So где ты, where do you? Работаешь is a conjugated form of работать in T form. So где ты работаешь, where did you and where do you work? So in this case you can also understand that while we using this particular case, Pradloshni Pradesh, where we are using the O, we are changing the personal pronouns. We are also changing the structure when especially we are using gijia, and as well as we can see that we are conjugating the verbs as well. So now let's go ahead and understand the text further. Natasha, a ty не спросил о нем? Natasha is saying, a ty не спросил о нем, and you did not ask about him. So here after о тебе, обо мне, we have the third expression о нем, about the person, about him. Антон, я уже знаю, где он живет и работает. Then Anton is saying, я уже, I already know, я уже знаю, где он живет и работает. Where does he live and work? So here you have found basically three very important concepts. When we have personal pronouns in this particular case, so in place of ya, we say abo mnie, about myself, about me. Then when you have tui, and if you want to say about you, singular, then we use achibye. And when we say about him, about her, in that case for about him initially we use anyom, and when we have about her we say anye. You will of course learn more about these constructions further, but please remember a, ob and abo are variations of the same preposition a. Ab is used when following word starts with vowel. Okay, so in this case abetam, because the word eta, so abetam, abantonam. Okay, so like this. Abo is used when following word has two initial consonants, aba minye. So in this case minye, letter m and letter n are together, so that is why it has aba minye. So here when we are talking about two basic questions, akom and achom, a noun requires the preposition o before it. So we have a very slight idea about how do we change it. In the previous dialogue we have seen a few such nouns changing, like achom and akom. So when he says akom on gavrit adruge, about whom he is talking about friend. Achom on gavrit, about what he is talking. On gavrit, a film, he is talking about a film. So this kind of construction you have to be very careful, that when we have certain subject, certain object, and when to differentiate them as per the Russian grammar, whether it belongs to animate or inanimate. And only after that you will be able to use the question akom or achom. So while answering the question gye, akom or achom, the nouns and their qualifying adjectives, they also undergo similar changes. For example, in the previous dialogue we have seen achom on gavrit. There was a construction, the sentence, the person says achom on gavrit, about what he is saying or he is talking. So we have used a novam ruskam film. So the novi ruski film changes as per the requirement of the prepositional case. A novam ruskam film. So likewise you will see more such examples in this section, so please pay attention, and we would also like to recommend you to note down such important information, aspects, examples which we are discussing with you, so that when you discuss it and practice with your family and friends, you will find learning Russian easy. Okay, now let's pay attention to the exercise. I'll start with the first one. Где он работает? Где means where, он работает, he works. Where does he work? Он работает на большом заводе. So here we can very easily see that we have a predlog or preposition in the form of na, which means at. So he works where? At большом заводе. We already know if we want this to be nominative case, then большой завод. Alright, masculine gender. So that is why the ending of the adjective большой, и краткий, большой, о и краткий in case of большой changes into ом, большом, and завод changes into заводе. Он работает на большом заводе. Alright, now I hope this is clear to you. Now let's go to the next question. О чем он рассказывает? About what he is saying. Он рассказывает о большом заводе. So we have used the same example but in two different contexts. First question we have asked где он работает, whereas in the second question we have asked о чем, about what. So where, question number 1, question number 2, about what. So о чем он рассказывает о большом заводе. So we have replaced the predlog because we don't want the preposition when we have the question о чем. Okay, so we have changed it with o, and then the remaining part of the sentence remains same, большом заводе. So you can also practice with such clarity that when and where you need to use the preposition and where and when we need to insert or put o. Then if you look at the example, you will find that in case of masculine gender, the adjective and the noun changes like in this case. Okay, now let's go ahead and pay attention to a few more examples. Где он работает? Where does he work? Он работает на маленькой фабрике. So here we have changed the gender of the noun. We have used the word fabrica. And since it ends with a, we already know the word which ends with a is a feminine gender word. So accordingly, the adjective would also be changing as per the requirement of the ending of the noun. So fabrica, if I want to say factory, a small factory, I would use malinkaya fabrika. But since we are talking about the prepositional case, we need to follow the rules of this case. Specifically in this case, when we have a question, где он работает. So он работает, he works at на маленькой фабрике. He works at the small factory. Okay, so please pay attention to the endings. Oi, malinkoi, malinkai fabrike. So at end we have also used ye. Like in case of masculine gender, we have used ye at the end. So as we have used in this case as well when we are talking about the nouns ending. But when we are talking about the adjectives ending, it will change into o, e kratki. Whereas in case of, let's go to the previous part. Here we have seen that when we have a masculine gender noun, we have changed, for example, большой into большом. We have used om, om. Whereas in this case, let's go ahead. Whereas in this case, if you pay attention, the ending of malinkaya changes into malinkai, o e kratki. So you have to be very clear when we talk about genders in prepositional case, how the ending of the noun, how the ending of adjective changes. So now let's pay attention to the third one. Где она живет? Where does she live? Где она живет? Where does she live? Она живет в новом общежитии. So here we have this word общежитие. Общежитие. Alright. Which gender? Общежитие. Of course, neuter. But in this case, the ending of the adjective as well as the noun, they are changing as the masculine gender. So here in this case, please pay attention. Она живет в новом общежитии. Whereas in the second question, о чем она пишет, about what she is writing, она пишет о новом общежитии. She is writing about new hostel. So here общежитие remains same, whereas you can also see the adjectives ending новом, but the question in the first case we have used где, that is why we have used the preposition в, whereas when we ask the question о чем, about what, we have used о. Alright, so I think the concept is clear. To reinforce it further, please pay attention and do exercise as many as times and use these kind of concepts in your own sentences. Alright, okay, now let's go ahead and let's see some of the very important verbs we generally used in this case, which is known as prepositional case or предложный падеж. Okay, so the first one is думать, then рассказывать, then спрашивать, then говорить, then вспоминать. So you already know some of them. Now let's learn the meaning of them one by one. Думать means to think. Рассказывать means to narrate or to tell something about. Спрашивать to ask. Говорить to speak. Вспоминать to remember. Okay, now let's see the conjugation of these verbs. For example, the first one, думать. Я думаю, ты думаешь, он, она думает, мы думаем, вы думаете, они думают. So think. When we are using the verb to think, let's use some sentences to understand it clearly. Думать. About whom and about what you can use in both cases. Думать. Он думает о друге. Он, he, думает. He is thinking about, о ком, about о друге. О друге. He is thinking about friend. He is thinking about friend. Now, он думает о своей семье. He is thinking about his family. О чем он думает? About what he is thinking. So here you can also replace it with animate or inanimate, different type of nouns, so that you can have a fair idea how to use this verb in different conjugation. For example, in place of on, we can use о чем мы думаем, about what are we thinking. So we can use мы думаем об уроке, об уроке. So we are not saying a уроке, we are saying об уроке. Об, why and when do we use об? When we have the first vowel. Any word which starts with vowel, we use об. Об уроке. О чем вы думаете? About what? About what are you thinking? So you can use я, вы. The answer can be я думаю о занятии. So I am thinking about the class. Занятие. So when we have the nominative case, we have занятие, but in this case we are changing into this case, so a занятие, like you have done об общежитие, because it is also starting with vowel. So об общежитие. For example, you have many other verbs, рассказывать. So you can also conjugate it like я рассказываю, ты рассказываешь, он, она рассказывает, мы рассказываем, вы рассказываете, они рассказывают. And спрашивать you can also conjugate. Я спрашиваю, ты спрашиваешь, он, она спрашивает, мы спрашиваем, ты спрашиваешь. And we can also, repeat it again. Я спрашиваю, ты спрашиваешь, он, она спрашивает, мы спрашиваем, вы спрашиваете, они спрашивают. Likewise, you can also conjugate говорить. Я говорю, ты говоришь, он, она говорит, мы говорим, вы говорите, они говорят. And вспоминать. Я вспоминаю, ты вспоминаешь, он вспоминает, мы вспоминаем, вы вспоминаете, они вспоминают. So, for example, in this case, о чем ты вспоминаешь? About what? Or simply you can also use these different kind of verbs where you can say я думаю о детстве. Детство means childhood. So I am thinking about childhood. Я думаю о детстве, о моем детстве. Я рассказываю о своей семье. Я спрашиваю о друге. Я говорю о фильме. Я вспоминаю. And further, you can also have a very good number of verbs in Russian where we use them in especially this prepositional case, so that you can have a clarity where and when to use different kind of verbs, so that you can use both the questions о ком and о чем. But since we have talked about that whenever you are using о ком and о чем, the most important thing is that the verb should belong to animate or inanimate. So there should not be any confusion among the learners that the noun which you are going to use in this specific construction belongs to animate or inanimate. So be very wise while using the noun and then construct the question and answer accordingly. However, we also would like to suggest you to pay attention to the adjective endings, as you have already seen. In that case, we were saying that о чем он говорит о новом русском фильме. You can also change it to feminine gender. О чем он говорит о новой аудитории. So in place of masculine gender noun, we have changed into auditoria, which is a feminine gender noun. And likewise, you can use some of them or all of them in different style in different sentences. Okay, all right. Now let's go ahead and pay attention to some of the questions, and we will see that how do we use both the construction о ком and о чем in order to have a clear understanding. So here we have the question о ком рассказывает брат. So here we have seen the meaning of the verb рассказывать means to narrate. О ком, about whom brother is narrating. Брат рассказывает о друге. He is narrating, he is talking about a friend, друг. О чем думает сестра? About what sister is thinking. Сестра думает об институте. So here sister is thinking about the institute, and you can see the construction об институте and when we are pronouncing it without any pause, as if it is a complete one word, but it's not. However, it is just a style how do we speak Russian. So, Sistra думает об институте. So, please remember, ye is added at the end if the masculine noun ends in a hard consonant. So, whenever it is ending in ge, in te, like in case of drug, institute, so we are changing into druge institute and putting the o or ob as per the rules of the Russian grammar. Alright, I hope the concept is absolutely clear to you all now. Now we shall discuss about a few more such important concepts of Russian which we specifically use in the prepositional case. Alright, now let's go ahead. So in this module you have seen with a few examples we discussed about two basic questions which we use in prepositional case is akom and achom, and since it comes from kto and shto, which we already know means animate and inanimate, means who and what. So when we talk about prepositional case we have a question где, but at the same time we use this construction in order to say about whom and about what. So in the initial you have seen a dialogue between Natasha and Anton where they are talking about, we have seen the personal pronouns being changed. For example, обо мне, about me, о тебе, about you, о нем, about him, о ней, about her, and accordingly we have о нас, about us, о вас, about you plural, and о них, about they. So you need to remember all these aspects, as well as we have talked about when do we use a, when do we use ob, and when do we use aba. So a we normally use when the next word is not starting with a vowel, but when the next word is starting with a vowel we use aba, aba, aba. So ob plus the vowel. For example, ab Antonia we have used ob, whereas aba we use especially when we have any word which has two consonants together. For example, обо мне. So in this case you can see that how do we use a, ob and обо мне. Alright, now we have also talked about many other constructions of sentences where we have seen the changing of the adjective endings. For example, о чем он думает, or we can say о чем он говорит, about what he is saying. Он говорит о большом новом заводе, big new plant he is saying. And then you can also have a new construction, о ком он говорит о своей сестре. So here we have seen that the construction of своя changes into своей сестре, and as well as we have seen that how do we change various other endings of the noun. We have very simple concept that noun ending, if it is hard, simply we put ye at the end. Alright, so in case of feminine gender we also put ye at the end, but the adjective endings is absolutely different. In case of adjective ending it is om, whereas in the case of feminine gender is o, e kratki. So you have to be very clear about it. We shall be discussing more about this concept in our upcoming modules. I hope you enjoyed this module. Thank you.